I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. And we're checking in with Assemblymember Landon Dais, a Bronx Democrat who previously worked as the political director of the Marijuana Policy Project of New York and recently introduced a bill intended to address unlicensed marijuana products, including those grown out of state, from ending up on the shelves of New York dispensaries. Thanks for making the time, Assemblymember.
Thank you for having me, David.
So right now, the marijuana industry in New York is in the process of implementing what's known as a seed-to-sale tracking system, essentially assigning a unique code to everything that is grown, processed, and sold in New York to keep track of that provenance of marijuana goods. Given that program that we're now implementing, what are the gaps in the system that you think could be addressed with your legislation?
So there's two pieces of legislation. One is my track and trace bill, which
Sure.
we're negotiating right now in the budget.
Okay.
The other is an anti-inversion bill. So I'm going to start with track and trace.
Let's do it.
As you stated, I was the political director for Marijuana Policy Project, MPP. I also worked at MedMen, which was one of the first registered organizations here in New York. I opened up the first West Coast style dispensary on 38th and 5th Avenue, and I was also over compliance for our grow site in Utica, New York, in Senator Griffo's district, where I actually built a cool relationship with Senator Griffo. The reason why I bring that up is because of my direct experience in dealing with track and trace.
Mm-hmm.
There's a software called BioTrack, which is, I hated it, and that got bought up by Metric,
Right.
who currently oversees that, the original contract. So even though they call it, I'm doing air quotes, y'all, a partnership. There's 3 levels of tagging. The plant itself gets tagged, so the mother plant, the clone, and that's the first tag. The second tag is what you call package tag, which is whatever product you create from that plant. It's a bulk or wholesale packaging.
Sure.
So if you have a box which has a 12 by 12 slots in it, that's 144 products, that would be one package, one unique identifier batch number for that package. That's how every state outside of New York does it. We took it, unfortunately, one step further, which is each individual item would have what's called a retail tag, which is an individual one. So basically, if you have a pre-roll, a 5-pack, or a single pre-roll, each one would have to have its own retail identifier, which costs 10 cents a piece.
Sure. And the businesses are paying for that.
Correct. And so this is an unnecessary cost for the extra 10 cents a tag because the cannabis industry is growing at a tremendous and exponential rate. Mm-hmm. I understand that some people want to talk about safety and tracking, but by doing it by the package number, you can still track it and where it was sold, who bought it, and where it went.
But aren't we sometimes seeing products that are in other states, including systems that are run by Metric,
Yes.
where their products are ending up on New York shelves? So theoretically, wouldn't that be a case to say those other tracking systems aren't working and maybe New York should do it differently?
No, because the track and trace, they will still have to have an identifier,
Okay.
which it will go back to the original plant. And so it still is a filter in what you're trying to do. Inversion is there's no magic pill to stop all inversion because it's profitable for certain people. I do have an anti-inversion bill, which is to make sure that we put a little bit more scrutiny on our legalized shops to make sure they don't do that. But that's not going to be solved by the retail tag issue. So I agree that inversion coming from other states is an issue. But the reality is the majority of that stuff isn't being sold in our illegal shops also, right? It's being sold in the illegal smoke shops or the non-licensed smoke shops and in other entities, right? Which we need to make sure that the city, the municipalities have the ability to shut those down. Right now, it's also about taking an OCM that has been struggling and making sure that it's as efficient as possible. The second reason why I'm big on supporting my bill, which would take out the retail tag, is that there's a pending lawsuit. And I believe we will lose that lawsuit as a state because I haven't seen the full contract, but from my understanding, in the original BioTrack contract, there was no mention of the retail tags. And now with a pending lawsuit that was filed in the beginning of March, my bill would basically make that lawsuit moot. And I believe that those behind the lawsuit would drop it if they see the change coming ahead. I think they're going to force our hand on this anyway. So why go through the legal maneuvers? Why go through the legal costs? Why not save the industry money, which also means more money going back into the reinvestment fund? And this would also help specifically to curate the minority, business, veteran, disabled owners of our producers and on the retail side. And for the first time, as someone who was on the board of the Medical Marijuana Association, forgot the acronym, we have every association is pretty much on board. I have never seen that in the cannabis industry where everyone is on board with something. And so it just makes common sense, it makes business sense, it makes political sense, and I think we need to get it done.
It's interesting to hear you bring up that idea of looking at the potential for a loss in court and addressing that proactively with legislation, because historically with the Office of Cannabis Management, when they have gone to court, they've been losing a lot of cases, and there hasn't been that response from the legislature to say, well, let's address the underlying problem here. And that seems to suggest to me that you are stepping up in a way that previous lawmakers haven't. So, I mean, did you see a void in the legislature? Is that something that you're hoping to fill?
I don't think it's a void. What I do think is I have a unique skill set. Not Liam Nielsen, but I have a background in cannabis regulations, cannabis law. I'm a cannabis attorney. And ironically, I laugh because when I came into the assembly, I wanted to get out. I didn't want to be pigeonholed in cannabis. Like, I have construction background, advanced manufacturing. I wanted to broaden my scope.
Sure.
And in the famous scene of Godfather 3, granted not a great movie, just one thing I got pulled back in. Because, when I was at MedMen, I didn't have the best relationship with the majority leader, right? Because she thought I represented corporate cannabis, even though I was pushing behind the scenes to make sure minorities and veterans were a part of it, right? But what she did know is that I had an understanding of it, and we built a trusting relationship when I first came in. And I think I'm in the legislature now for 2 years, I built up a trust level with her where she felt, and she knows how I work, she knows my work ethic, and she felt comfortable allowing me to be one of the people working with her. John Socorro is another person, Donna Lapardo, chair of agriculture, Dee Dee Barrett. So it's a coalition, and Senator Jeremy Cooney and
Liz Kruger.
And Senator Hinchy, who is the Senate sponsor on my track and trace bill. And so we've built a coalition from across the state, downstate and upstate, and then all in between. And I think what we're seeing is we don't want OCM to make any more mistakes. We don't want to see them embarrassed in newspapers anymore. And we want the system to work. We're getting really good tax revenue. It's creating jobs. Let's make the system better so that it can be what we thought it could be.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you. For listeners just joining us, this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. I'm David Lombardo, and we're speaking with Assemblymember Landon Dais, a Bronx Democrat. So is there any appetite to formalize that role that you're playing in the marijuana sector, whether as a new committee chair or maybe a cannabis subcommittee like we have in the Senate?
I think there's conversations, but that's above my pay grade. That comes down to the speaker and the majority leader.
Sure.
So all I can do right now is focus on the work at hand that my colleagues have asked me to take the lead on, and I'm going to try to get it done, working collaboratively across the aisle and across the state, because that's the only way you can get anything done in the assembly. You have to build a coalition. You have to build a narrative, and that's what I'm putting together.
You mentioned earlier the cost that the marijuana industry businesses are having to shoulder as part of the seed-to-sale tracking system. Is there discussion right now in the context of the budget about having the state take on at least some of that cost, or has that fallen by the wayside? Because I know that is what the industry would like to see happen.
My understanding is that we've had, it was in the Senate one house, it was not in ours, but I do believe there's been movement on that. It's just there's so many other big table items right now that's taking all the oxygen out the room. Like, it's in the back of the of the queue. But I do believe that there's an appetite to absorb some of that, because it wouldn't come out the general budget. It will come out the tax revenue from cannabis sales or from OCM, so which would be Section 78, Part 3 of the MRTA law.
You're just bragging now, though. And you also could just be making it up. I don't know.
It's basically the part where it's supposed to be a self-funded agency, so where their operations come out of their tax revenue.
I want to come back to the inversion bill. And
Sure.
In terms of, say, a deterrent there, are you primarily focused on civil penalties? Because that's what I see in the bill.
Civil.
And why do you view that as being more meaningful than a criminal penalty?
I am not going to recriminalize marijuana.
Okay.
So it's funny. I was talking to someone in Ways and Means, and they're like, why are you so passionate about this? And I'm passionate for something that happened to me when I was 15 years old. Well, I was 14, actually. Me and my best friend, I went to a very good high school in the Bronx, and I just had my best basketball game of my life. I had my first double-double. I had my uniform on underneath my jacket and khaki pants. We were on the train station, and a cop came up onto the platform and accused us of smoking weed. At that time, never had ever touched it, never was a part of it. I was a 14-year-old. We were focused on being our best athletes we could be, and we were best friends. He was the manager of the basketball team. I was on the basketball team. Threw us against the billboard, smashed my head into the billboard. My friend asked me, hey, what are you doing? We asked for a badge number. He slammed his head into the billboard. That was my first negative interaction as a young man, as a young boy, with police when it came to marijuana enforcement. We had nothing. We got on the train. Everyone moved away from us. We were in tears, and it was a Metro North conductor who asked us, "Are we okay?" He saw we were crying. We were broken. My best friend's father was also attorney, and my mom, and he defended us. And the cop basically said, "Hey, we can make this easy. Just go away. Don't make a big deal, or I can make their life hell." And at that age, and then and again, when I was a senior in college, one of my good friends from college were driving to spring break to Miami. We got pulled out by gunpoint by cops, and they accused us of having marijuana in our car, and we did not. I swore from that day on that I will one day legalize cannabis because I don't want another young man who looks like me to go through that experience. So I will not create a backdoor to the recriminalization of cannabis. That's why it's civil only and not criminal, because at the end of the day, what do people care about in this industry, legal or not, is money. And that's the only reason why it's a civil penalty and not a criminal.
And do you feel like the civil penalties are a big enough deterrent? Because for some businesses, when we think about white-collar crime, they bake that into the cost of doing business.
Yes. I mean, obviously, we can come in with a heavy hand. But when you come in with a heavy hand, then we don't think about the consequences of another young person, life being damaged by something, by a plant that's made by God and honestly shouldn't be illegal. So I am not going to create a backdoor to recriminalization of cannabis. It's simply to create a financial deterrent so that people no longer will do it. Because at the end of the day, the reason why I care about stopping inversion is making sure that we have a safe supply chain of well-grown cannabis products from New York growers and producers, and supporting New York products. I want us to support the New York economy, and that's our number one goal. We do not need, and plus the products coming from these other states aren't that great. It's coming from Oklahoma, and which are coming from some really nefarious organizations. It's coming from parts of Ohio and parts of Oregon and California, and I just really believe in the product being grown here in New York.
And after a quick break, we'll continue our conversation with Assemblymember Landon Dais, a Bronx Democrat.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided in part by the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Fraud and lawsuit abuse impact car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Reforms are being proposed to mitigate their impact. Information on these reforms is available at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell and Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. I'm David Lombardo, and we're continuing our conversation with Assemblymember Landon Dais, a Bronx Democrat who's talking about the challenge of ensuring that only licensed marijuana products end up on the shelves of New York's dispensaries. And to achieve that goal, he is the sponsor of legislation that would enhance civil penalties for companies and individuals promoting the sale of unlicensed marijuana products, including cannabis, from out of state. I want to come back to those interactions with law enforcement because it clearly resonates with you however many years later, and this is kind of a diversion of what we were here to talk about, but how has that informed your thoughts on law enforcement now as you are responsible for legislating on issues related to law enforcement? Because you clearly have those very personal, firsthand experiences.
I have a great relationship with the 44th and 46th precinct in my district. I represent an area in the Southwest Bronx. We have one of the hotter districts, as you would call it, right?
Okay.
We do. We have a crime issue in my district. But it's really dealing with poverty, right? If you create more resources, more jobs, more opportunities, crime goes down. It's very simple. So I applaud the police officers, the Leos, who do a good job. There's tremendous, tremendous cops in my precincts who I have a great relationship with. But like anything, there's always a negative element in any organization, from doctors, lawyers, judges, the legislature to police. And those are the ones we need to weed out, right? I have a good relationship with the PBA. And from my conversation with them, they equally agree. They don't want bad cops in their ranks because it makes their other cops' job more dangerous. So it's about communication. It's about community policing. They don't call it NCOs anymore. I'm blanking on the new term they use now. But my community police officers, like, I call them all the time. and they see me and they know that we do food distributions together, I want young people to know their rights as a lawyer, but also to have a relationship with the police in their district, so they get to know them and vice versa. And when you have that community policing, when you have that relationship between both the community and the local police, that is when, one, we have greater communication, we have greater unity in our community, and I think that's the real holistic way to attack crime, and that's how we get things done.
That bad apples theory, though, is counter to the sort of other narrative that's pushed by progressive criminal justice advocates, which is essentially that the institutions themselves are flawed. And that would almost speak to the issue you raised about the marijuana enforcement, that people were using drug crimes as a way to enforce, racist policing tactics. So it sounds like you don't take that same view about the institution being inherently broken.
I think there's clear flaws within the institution. However, I can't condemn the sins of their father, the sons and the daughters of the sins of their mother and father,
Sure.
right? I have to believe, because what happened was some of those bad apples were at the top of those organizations, and they're the ones who put in those procedures, who put in that infrastructure. I think a lot of the new cops today, I know some of them in the high levels, they came from New York City, they came from some of these communities, and I think you've seen a change in that, right? But I will never dismiss that there isn't some institutional issues that we still need to tackle, and that is why doing the anti-inversion bill, doing the track and trace bill, doing common sense legislation, which adds that aspect into our thinking, is how we dismantle what's left of a negative institution and make sure what's left is the best working institution that's best for the community, keeps people safe, and keeps New York moving forward.
Well, thank you for bringing it back to marijuana for me, so I can pivot to the Office of Cannabis Management, which has a new acting executive director right now, John Kagia, who seems pretty widely respected. He comes from the private sector, but has spent a few years now in the agency. While the Assembly won't eventually get a say on, confirming him if he is appointed to this in a permanent position, what are your thoughts on him and his capacity to lead this institution?
I think part of the reason why I'm pushing for track and trace is to help him. The last executive director, she just was not informed. She came from Children and Family Services.
Yeah, outside the marijuana world.
This was not her world. Chris Alexander, who was the first, he had a tough job, right? And him and I have had our disagreements, but he had a tough job. But what I do know is I'm trying to support John. And this bill is to make sure he's not left holding the bag, right? And that's why I make that lawsuit moot. I want to make sure that he has the resources to make the OCM as strong as possible. As the metric contract is up for expiration, I think in 2027, there is no reason for the retail tax to be part of that conversation. Let's lower the cost or the value of that contract, right? Let's set the bar, let's hold him to standards, and let's make sure that he has the tools that will allow him to be an effective OCM director. I do believe he will be confirmed by the Senate. I think Senator Kruger likes him, and I think he has good rapport.
But he sounds great.
No, he knows his stuff.
Oh, I meant his accent. But that too.
I think he has a good understanding. I think Ty, who's also one of the lawyers for OCM, has a good understanding of everything, and I think he's willing to work with me. I think he's willing to work with the majority leader and the senator, and I think we can get and Senator Cooney. I think we can get some good things done. So as of right now, he has my support, and the reason why I'm pushing for the track and trace bill is because I think it puts him in a stronger position. It puts him in a better place. It puts OCM in the right place, and I think it demonstrates to the industry that OCM, that the legislature and the governor are taking this seriously.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you. For listeners just joining us, this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with Assemblymember Landon Dais, a Bronx Democrat who is rumored to be in contention to be the next chair of the Assembly's Subcommittee on Cannabis. So in the last couple of years, the big issue in the marijuana space was the illegal dispensaries, and we saw the effort to crack down on them. Right now, it seems like inversion is one of the hot topics. What's going to be the next big issue? I mean, because there are a variety of things that need to be tackled, whether it's in the growing side of things, whether it's the medical side of things. What do you think is the next thing that's going to captivate our attention, or maybe be put into the limelight by whoever might be the next cannabis subcommittee chair in the Assembly?
I think we need to put a focus on the farmers and hemp, because I think hemp's kind of like fallen off the radar.
Sure.
And hemp can be a really exciting economic engine for New York. But I would know from the beginning, and I lost money in the industry, a lot of the hemp farmers lost their shirts. You know what I mean? And
Did they try growing new ones using hemp?
Well, we need to because
Sorry, hemp farmers.
Because the issue is we don't have mass production of hemp products in the state. And I think there's an opportunity there. Hemp concrete, hemp bricks, especially as we're talking about like environmental laws and all of that. Hemp has a really good R factor when it comes to insulation. It's really good in absorbing carbon. And so there's something there. So we need to invest in that. The second thing is the Community Reinvestment Fund. We need to take a serious look to make sure that money is getting out the door, that money is going to the organizations that are have boots on the ground and doing positive work. 40% of the money left over after Section 3 goes to the Community Reinvestment Fund, and I want to make sure it is making an impact. And that's something that I know the majority leader cares about, Johnson Carl cares about, Donald Lepardo cares about, and I will be the first person to bring that up if I ever have the opportunity to make sure that we're held accountable and that money is getting out the door and impacting people, just like we did with the Black Task Force with $30 billion getting out the door. We need to show the people in New York that the legislature is working for them.
The hemp issue was all the rage following federal action, I think, in 2018, and that was prior to marijuana legalization. So how do you get people excited about that since it's no longer the new and shiny thing?
I think we need to create the market.
Okay.
I think that comes from a production side. We need to have a long-term thinking, economic thinking of our agricultural economy in New York State, because we are an agricultural state. You and I have talked about this, right? We're, I think, number 3 in dairy. I think we're top 3 in apples. We're like top 5 in apricots, number 1 in cabbage. I think hemp can be up there also. But if we have the production side to make sure that we're now making bricks and other products that are making our homes more environmentally friendly, that's now creating a whole economic ecosystem that is just going to help the whole cannabis and hemp industry grow at the same time, while also helping meet our goals of housing and energy efficiency. So I really want to put a focus on that, but that's more long-term thinking, working with Empire State Development Corporation and other folks that want to take that seriously.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Landon Dais. He is a Bronx Democrat who is, as of right now, not the cannabis subcommittee chair in the Assembly. Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time.
As always, man, thank you.
Support for Capitol Press Room comes from National Fuel, working to help customers understand what drives energy bills, from taxes and state-mandated programs to market-driven price increases for natural gas, which utilities don't profit from. More information at betterplansnobans.com.
And by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.